What if trying to fix yourself is what keeps you broken? 3 a.m. The ceiling again. Another technique, another book, another promise that this one will finally work. You've been here before. The breathing exercise, the visualization, the mantra that was supposed to quiet the noise. And for a moment, maybe it did. Then the noise came back, louder, somehow, as if it had been waiting. There's a pressure in your chest at this hour. Not pain, something more precise. A tightness that says you're not doing enough, not being enough, not fixed enough yet. So you reach for the next method, the next teacher, the next version of yourself you're supposed to become. Because stopping feels like giving up, and giving up feels like death. Believer or skeptic, you've felt that pressure, the one that wakes you up at 2 a.m. and whispers that everyone else has figured it out except you. That's the door this opens. It sounds simple. It's the most dangerous sentence in this entire tradition. By the end, the question you came in with will be gone, not answered. Gone. Here's what doesn't add up. You've been diligent, disciplined. You've done the work every teacher recommends. And yet, that tightness in your chest at 3 a.m. hasn't loosened. It's migrated. Now it lives in your shoulders on Sunday night. Now it sits behind your eyes during the meditation you scheduled to finally fix this. Now it clenches your jaw when someone asks how you're doing, and you say fine, while your body screams otherwise. The body keeps the score, and your body is telling you what your head refuses to hear. You notice it in the gap between techniques. When one method ends and the next hasn't begun. In that raw second, before you grab the next tool, a flicker. A kind of exhaustion that has nothing to do with sleep. An exhaustion with the whole project of becoming. With the belief that if you sand down the right edge, install the right fixture, the house will finally feel like home. But the house is never finished. And the contractor is exhausted. And that's the crack. That's the moment the ego fears most. Not failure, not darkness. The moment you might cease pushing. The moment you might set down the tools and look at the unfinished house and realize you've been living in it all along. A Tibetan master named Chögyam Trungpa, a man who spent his life watching Western seekers arrive with the same suitcase of techniques, saw this pattern with painful clarity. He called it spiritual materialism. The ego, he said, is capable of converting everything to its own use, including spirituality, especially spirituality. Trungpa described what he called the three lords of materialism. The lord of form uses comfort and security to build a cage. The lord of speech uses ideologies, even spiritual ones, to filter reality until it confirms what you already believe. But the most dangerous is the lord of mind. This one uses meditation, therapy, and every method you've collected to maintain the one thing the ego cannot survive without. The sense that you are a solid, continuous self that requires fixing. The more you meditate to improve yourself, the more you strengthen the one who wants to improve. The more you seek peace, the more you reinforce the seeker. It's not that the techniques are wrong. It's that the hand holding them is the same hand that built the prison. Trungpa saw students who had mastered every posture, memorized every sutra, collected certificates like trophies, and were more trapped than when they started. Because now their prison had stained glass. He compared their spiritual knowledge to a room filled with beautiful antiques. Each one seemed precious when you found it. But now they're piled on top of each other, and the beauty of each one is lost in the clutter. The room was beautiful when it was empty. White walls, simple floor, one lamp. One object of art that everyone could see, including you. The knowledge, he said, has to be heated and hammered like gold. Not collected. Lived. You don't require more information. You have to end using information as a substitute for looking. Trungpa wasn't the first to see this. The Buddha once taught a famous musician who wanted to learn meditation. The musician asked, "Should I tighten my head or let it go completely loose?" The Buddha answered with a question about his instrument. "How do you tune the strings?" The musician said, "Not too tight, not too loose." The Buddha replied, "So it is with your practice." That story has survived for 2,000 years because it points to what the head cannot grasp through effort. The state you're seeking is not a product. It's not something you build, brick by brick, method by method. The Buddha compared it to the sun behind clouds. You don't construct the sun. You don't earn it. You burn away what obscures it. And the first thing that burns is the belief that you have to do the burning. This isn't asking for faith. It's asking you to test it once and see what happens. But Trungpa didn't stop here. He went deeper. Think about drifting off. Everyone has had the experience of lying in bed, completely exhausted, attempting desperately to fall asleep. You count breaths. You relax your toes. You adjust the pillow. You tell yourself to let go while clenching every muscle in the attempt. And the harder you push, the more awake you become. Sleep is not something you do. It's an event that happens when you cease doing. When the effort halts, the body takes over. It knows how to settle. It always knew. The attempt was the only obstacle. The ego is the insomniac part of you, the part that believes stillness must be earned, that slumber must be achieved, that action must be taken. And so it lies there, wide awake, cataloging every failure to settle. It builds a career out of not sleeping. It writes books about insomnia. It attends seminars on better rest. And all the while, the body waits in the next room, unable to enter because the noise of the attempt is too loud. But here's what the insomniac never notices. The moment sleep arrives, it's always the same. You were pushing. Then you weren't. Then you were gone. You didn't fall asleep. You let go of being awake. The difference is everything. And in the morning, you don't remember the moment of surrender. You only remember that at some point, the war ended. Remember what you felt at the start. That pressure in your chest at 3 a.m.? Look at it now. Not to fix it. Not to breathe through it or reframe it. Just to see it. It's not a sign that you're broken. It's a sign that some part of you has been attempting to hold the whole ocean in a cup. And the cup is tired. The cup has been tired for years. And the ocean doesn't require holding. The Buddha found that we don't have to fight the three lords. We don't have to defeat the ego. We don't have to win some spiritual war that would finally make us worthy of peace. We only have to see that the fight itself is the Lord of Mind's finest defense. The moment you cease swinging, the shadow has nothing to resist. And without resistance, it begins to thin. Not because you've conquered it, because you've stopped feeding it. You don't have to become someone else. You don't have to arrive anywhere. The sun behind the clouds doesn't have to be built. It only requires the clouds to cease holding themselves together. The clouds are just water. They were never meant to be architecture. There's a line from the third patriarch that sounds like an insult until you need it. Using mind to cultivate mind, is this not a great mistake? It only sounds like criticism. It's actually permission. Permission to end the project. To let the room empty out. To let the antiques gather dust while you sit in the white space that was always the point. To set down the cup and discover that the ocean was never outside of you. The ocean was the thing that knew how to hold itself all along. The question you came in with, "How do I fix myself?" was never yours. It was borrowed from a world that sells solutions to problems it invented. Let it go. Not because you've solved it. Because you've seen that the one asking was never the one who needed fixing. The one asking was the last defense of a house that was already home.